Here we are. It took us 2 years since October 7 to finally move forward and to reach October 8. That long Saturday wasn't just an attack on Israel, it was an assault on humanity, on Jews, Christian, Muslim, foreign workers, people from all around the world who came here to celebrate life at the Nova Music Festival. That day, Hamas murdered 1,200 innocent people and they kidnapped hundreds more. They actually tried to kill the hope of peace in Middle East, but they failed.
The people of Israel, Jews, Christians, Muslim, and everyone who calls this land home, never gave up. Not for a single day. We never gave up on our hostages, and it took us 2 years to find the strength to speak. Because we couldn't start this conversation until our brothers and sisters were home. Now that they are, we're not going back. We're still waiting for Hamas to return the remains of more hostages that have been murdered. But we finally feel ready to move forward toward peace, security, and hopefully a new Middle East, based on unity and respect.
One more thing. If hope has survived, is thanks to the courage and support of this American administration. Sadly, Europe, once again, turned its back on the Jewish people, and by doing so, unfortunately, also on the Palestinians. So through these 2 very painful years, we will never forget those who stood with us, including many Palestinian friends, and nor those who looked away. But today, as the hostages are home and our hearts begin to heal, we are really ready to open a new chapter, a chapter of rebuilding, reconciliation, and renewal. So we would love to say thanks to all who stood by us in our darkest days and to hope that this is really the beginning of a new beginning.
So, in this spirit of hope, we're honored to introduce our first guest, a woman who has dedicated her life to building bridges between Israelis and Palestinians. Originally from Australia, she is a leader in the nonprofit world with over 20 years of experience bringing people together across cultures. She served as CEO of Project Rosanna, an international health diplomacy initiative, a veteran peace builder, and a true inspiration. We're very happy to welcome Ronit Zimmer to Women of Startup Nation. Thank you.
Thank you for having me today.
Thank you for coming, Ronit.
Pleasure.
So, can you tell us a little bit about your journey? How come that from Australia you decided to come to such a crazy place as Israel?
My journey was crazy. My father's Israeli. Okay, he met my mother here in Israel, and then I think when this is an extraordinary thing because when Menachem Begin came to power in 1977, which was just before I was born, my father decided, we're going to move back to Australia until the Labor Party comes back, right? So didn't really happen. and we would be, blessed today if Menachem Begin was in power. So I think there's a lot of irony in all of that. But I was brought up in a home where, my father, cared about Israel. He had served in 67, he served in 73. And for him and for me and for my siblings and, my mother, peace was always the goal. So I remember when Yitzhak Rabin was murdered. It was on the day of our English exam in Year 12, right? I remember when Oslo, the peace agreements were signed. I was 15, and I kept, we had our major newspaper in Melbourne was The Age, and it had, Israel PLO make peace, and I've still got that cut out,
Wow.
right, from 1993. And at university, I kind of focused. Also, I studied law, but I did a major in English, and in the end, it became women's studies and political science. And I wrote a thesis on the constitutional laws as they relate to women in Israel and as they relate to women in the Palestinian Authority. Not comparing, but just looking at how we can try and bridge Israelis and Palestinians, and particularly women. How do we promote women in leadership positions because they have a different approach?
And so, what brought you to Israel? When did you come to Israel?
I came to Israel when I was 24. I finished university. I met my partner. We traveled. And at some point, it was during the second Intifada in 2002. And yeah, it was the time where you had to, if you wanted the news, you had to go into an internet cafe.
Right.
And I remember being in Ushuaia in South America, that's in Uruguay, in Argentina. But we were kind of doing this crisscross between Uruguay and Argentina. And there was during Pesach, and there was every day another massive terror attack.
Yeah.
You know, the wedding, the buses,
The
the
cafes.
cafes. And my husband said to me, well, it wasn't my husband at the time, he said to me, I don't want to read this on the news anymore. I want to be part of Israel. So
Which is insane.
which was insane. That was in April, right? We went home. I think we did a Rosh Hashanah at home in Melbourne. We got engaged, and then we came back. And so that was towards the end of 2002, which means almost half my life I've been here.
And you made Israel your home.
And we made Israel our home. I have 3 Israeli children. Tel Aviv, not just Israel. I have to be very specific about it. We made Tel Aviv our home. And we've been here ever since.
So let me ask you, because I think the 3 of us and many of the women, especially the ones living in Israel who are listening to us, have lived or are living in the startup nation, and living here has definitely changed us. We would have taken a different trajectory had we stayed in our home country. So how has living in Israel changed you? Like, how did the startup nation made who you are today?
Okay.
Also in terms of your career
Yeah.
and
Okay.
your
Okay.
very specific career.
So let me go back. I think how Israel changed me was really kind of also, you know, it was also about why we ended up, well, why for me, you know, my husband said, oh, I don't want to be, you know, reading this in the news anymore. I want to be part of Israeli society. But for me, it was more about growing up in a very small Jewish community, um, and just wanting not to wear my religion or ethnicity on my sleeve, but just being part of a people where you could just be a normal citizen. And that is what not that I suffered, I had a beautiful childhood. I really have no complaints, right? Went to a great Jewish school, and, you know, Melbourne is a beautiful place to grow up.
I want to ask you, how many Jews are in Melbourne, more or less?
Around 40,000 Jews.
Okay, so in
right?
Milano, we are 5,000.
Yes. Okay. But yes. But when you think about the Jewish communities in America, both my brothers today are in New York. You know, you've got millions and millions of Jews. So, you know, other than New York, Israel is the only other place where you have a majority, or you have, you know, people who are just people, you know, citizens, and not specifically living in a small insular Jewish community. The other thing about the Melbourne Jewish community is that it's a community of Holocaust survivors, right? So, you know, all my grandparents were Holocaust survivors, all my partner's grandparents were Holocaust survivors, even his father. You know, so we grew up in the shadow of the Holocaust, right? So we grew up with this kind of survival instinct. You know, even the fact that I studied law, because, you know, you can't just go and study arts, right? You need a profession. You need to survive. So we kind of lived in this survival mentality. So for me leaving and for me coming here was really about freedom. It was really about freedom for my children. So, and I think that does connect to the startup nation, right? Because, you know, how did we become the startup nation? Because we survived, right? We had to find ways. If you go into the different kibbutzim, you know, and how they ended up, you know, making their livelihoods and becoming fruitful, because they had issues and they found solutions to those issues. And I think, you know, the startup nation is all about survival and finding the right solutions to the issues that we face. You know, and it's kind of like is what is giving me hope today, because we are facing a lot of issues, and I really hope we come together as a people, and a people that is not just the Jewish community in Israel, but, you know, the people of Israel, and we find the solutions in the most innovative way of how we deal and how we ensure a sustainable future for the state of Israel.
This brings me to the next question, because finally last week all the live hostages came back. Hopefully soon also who was being killed by Hamas. That some of them are already back, some they're still in Gaza. But this is supposed to lead us to the so-called phase 2, according to the Trump plan. Also, because of your experience bridging between the Palestinian and Israeli, we would like to know what do you think about this very peculiar phase, because we are between phase one and between phase two, so we're very excited but also very scared about what can or not happen.
I'll give you a little bit of my just
Please.
the
Sure.
background that I had
Yeah,
for the
this is
last
where
5 years, right?
yeah.
I left being CEO of Rosanna, which is a health diplomacy organization. We bring Israelis and Palestinians through health together. I left at the end of June. Okay, and it was a difficult period to be in health and in peace when you started with COVID and you were in war, and but we really did extraordinary work, and we had amazing impact and created real and genuine and um, effective and productive relationships between Israeli and Palestinian health practitioners. Okay?
Can you just give us a few examples of the projects that?
Okay, so we had twinned hospitals, right? So we had nurses from a hospital in Hebron working together with a hospital in Ashdod. I won't give names, but but and they would come every single week to learn together, and I mean, every week for 6 months, Israelis and Palestinians were working together, and then the war broke out. And what was quite extraordinary was, yes, yeah, there was a silence because everybody was scared on both sides, but you still had a nurse who was in reserve duty in Gaza still learning his Arabic. And you had the Palestinian nurses also still learning Hebrew, and they were still in contact saying, "Are you okay?" Now, everybody experienced the war in a different way, and we all have our, very traumatic lived experiences. But what was really amazing was that we were able to maintain those relationships because we didn't just look at common interests, or we both want to learn about ECMO training. We did instill dialogue training or dialogue facilitation within those relationships, and I think that that was one of the big things that we did, and all throughout the war as well. So for me, going from one stage to the other stage, I think, and I think that I speak for everybody, not everybody, but for a lot of people here. I don't think it's so easy to kind of think we've gone from one period to another period.
Yeah.
Yes, there was a moment of elation and a moment of, enormous emotion on the day where the live hostages came home. Of course, we're all still waiting for, the bodies so that they can get a burial, respectful burial here in our beloved country. But I think that you can't just go from one stage to the next stage.
Yeah.
Um, and we are also living in such uncertainty.
Yeah.
The stories that have come home, the hostages who are there, the way they look, the way they finding it hard to express themselves, right? Even just, what I've kind of been looking at is just pale skin and getting sentence structure, and opening their mouths to speak. They obviously didn't speak for such a long time.
Yeah, some of them were alone for 2 years.
They were alone for 2 years, in shackles. And then we can see now that Hamas is trying to assert its authority and killing whoever they think was, a traitor or I don't even think it was just people traitors, but those who are opposed to Hamas are now being slaughtered. And I think that we don't really know. Like, there's an uncertainty, and I don't necessarily think there will be more certainty once phase two. But hopefully, we do get something. Hopefully the international community and the consortium of the Arab world that have said enough's enough, that we do enter a phase of rehabilitation in Gaza and rehabilitation for us.
Yeah.
And that we do find rational leaders, because that represent the rational majority here and in Palestine, that want to just live in peace. I'm not saying that it's going to be easy. There are going to be obstacles, but at the end of the day, and this is what I've found over the last 20 even more years, we're all just human. We're all just mothers. We all just want a better future for our children. And the minute we understand that, the minute we can humanize, I'm sitting next to a Palestinian woman and she's sitting next to a Palestinian, a Jewish Israeli woman, and we see we're just people, things already change, but we're so scared and we have dehumanized everybody. We, them, us, the world. I mean, even the way the world has responded. You know, at the end of the day, we're just human beings. And we just want a better future for our children. We might think about my kids. Okay, I've got 3 teenagers.
So I want to ask you, you sort of touched the answer, but how has October 7th changed you? Like, in a way, because you had been in touch, I think a lot of Israelis don't know a lot of Palestinians and vice versa, but you had the opportunity, the privilege even, to know and to work with Palestinians. So how did you feel on October 7th? Did you feel betrayed? Did you feel you felt something was coming? How did it change you? How did it change the way you teach about peace, you think about peace? We all lived
I think we're still in a trauma. And I don't think our trauma, and this is what, you know, I think, I don't think our trauma started on October 7th, you know. The Jewish people have been living in trauma for a very, very long time. I think it really just strengthened my conviction that there's no other way but for peace, right? And you look at the peace treaties that Israel has signed with Jordan and with Egypt. Yes, they're not the warmest peace in the world, but they exist and we've been safe and we haven't gone to war with those who we have a peace treaty with. And I think that that is a good example of what we need. And I think October 7 showed that extremism in the same way that, you know, it was Hamas extremism, and there were extremists on the Israeli side too, right? That basically botched the Oslo Accords, right? And you know, with the outbreak of the Second Intifada, here, you know, we had talked about normalization with the Saudis, and we talked about, you know, broadening a regional peace, and then bang, October 7, the extremists, and I'm not equating extremism, okay, but there are extremists in Palestine. We certainly have our extremism, even though I do not equate one with the other, but they need to be marginalized. And the rational majority need to be the ones who are pushing toward humanizing the other and finding a way to live together. We are brilliant people. We've always found, we're a startup nation. We've always found the solutions to the different issues. Find the solution. Let's find a way to live together because I'm attached to the land and my Palestinian friend in Hebron, he's attached to his land. We need to find a way to live together. That's what I think.
Obviously, I think we all think the same. I'm trying to understand with you what it can be done in order to reach this creative solution. What are you scared about the most? But what are also your, if you have any hope, what is that the message hope of that we can also share with the people that are listening this podcast?
Look, I think the direction of the regional solution is the right one. One of the few mornings I woke up with optimism through the war was the morning after the first Iranian attack. I remember that. It was April 24. And we live in a tower in Tel Aviv, and my children and my husband were on the balcony and they were watching what was going on because we were not in the safety rooms in the middle of Tel Aviv. And I was watching the news, and I kind of fell asleep to the news, where the commentators were talking about the aerial diplomacy that brought together the Israelis, the Jordanians, the Emiratis, the Germans. And this to me was the beginning of something that is workable, that is feasible, right? And I do think in terms of part of that diplomacy, we can have a moderate Palestinian authority government that can be part of this regional solution. And I am a big believer in the Abraham Accords. I'm a big believer in extending the Abraham Accords and working toward a solution that ensures security and dignity for both Israelis and Palestinians. There's definitely, we need to have more women. You know, you can see even in the current government, even, you know, the pictures where, you know, the pictures of the peace summit, there was no women. Did you see
our Prime Minister?
Did you say that?
I was so proud.
Yes, exactly. Your Prime
Minister.
John Meloni standing there, standing straight.
Good on her. Exactly.
Well done.
Exactly. Well done. And she's been very assertive. and really rational. And yes, well done to your
Without
Prime
giving
Minister.
up her femininity, I think.
No, I think so too.
Sometimes when women get into power, into politics, they sort of put away their feminine side to be.
I think they're kind of forced to, you
they're
know,
forced
they're
to.
always forced to prove
And
themselves
I
more.
think the key here is for women to, to keep their feminine
Yeah.
side and bring it to the table as skills, as tools to reach
Yeah.
a better future.
As Rudy Chicago would say, how world would be if it would be run by a woman.
And well, let me just say, I didn't, you know, I had personal circumstances, but I started a PhD and I was working with Professor Nomi Khazan, and the thesis was, if there were more women, you know, as leaders, could we get to a peace agreement?
So looking forward, and also getting close to the end of this episode, there is actually a woman that would you like to talk about that was inspiring for you, and it can be inspiring for us. Looking forward for a better time and more peace in Middle East.
Look, Vivian Silver, who was murdered on October 7, she was, I think, you know, she's a woman who's an inspiration. I met with her quite a few times.
Oh, wow.
She was a very close friend of one of the board members at Rosanna, and he had asked me to help her organization, Women Wage Peace, with grants from the U.S. government, and I helped them. You know, Vivian. So she had Women Wage Peace, and she was also a driver for one of the organizations that drove Palestinian patients to hospitals in Israel or East Jerusalem. Rosanna also supported these organizations. It was part. We also had our own program of transportation. Now here is a woman who had enormous empathy, and he could really see the other side and try and respond to the needs. And that was on the one side, you know, because it wasn't just about humanitarian issues for her. It was also about trying to create a situation where there were peace, where there were rational women making decisions from a feminine place, right?
Yeah.
And I think she was a real inspiration. And now her son is really taking the reins, and he's pushing her ideas forward, which I think is amazing.
Pretty amazing, because the first immediate reaction is to say, "Oh, you know, that didn't work. I'm just gonna give up." And
but
there
even
is no hope for
just
peace.
like the other day on the news, they had she also came back. She was a hostage. Also, another woman of the same vintage. What's her name? Lifshitz.
Yeah, sure.
What was her name?
I don't remember the name.
Sarah.
So bad.
Anyway, she was one of the older women who was So anyway, they interviewed her on the day that the hostages came home, and she said, you know, I had to do some soul searching after I returned and after I was there and after what Hamas did to our home and to our kibbutzim. And then the journalist said to her, and what do you think? She says, I think we still need peace. And I agree. You know, everybody's experienced this war from a different perspective. You know, my daughter's a soldier. Her partner was in Gaza. Everybody had friends in the South.
Yeah.
I also experienced, I won't say experienced, but of course I have friends in Palestine. We had also people in Gaza. We had projects going in Gaza. So I was aware, and I had empathy for what the situation was there, and for us too. And I think that is the only way we can move forward, is if we can take a little step back and also understand our pain, but also understand the pain of our enemy. You know, and through that, you know, try and make some rational, practical, pragmatic decisions about how we move forward, because we can't be living in war forever.
Ronit, tell us your next project. What are you doing now?
So, you know, when I left, so when I left Rosanna, which was at the end of June, I kind of had this shtick in my head. I always wanted to be a screenwriter, right? And then my mother's like, "Oh no, you've got to go and study law." So I went to study law, but in university, I wrote. I did, you know, writing classes, and was really one of the things I always loved to do. And I had a communications business, and writing was always a part of me. But because of the necessity to survive, the writing was never about the art. It was really always just about what my clients needed. Anyway, I decided that I wasn't going to rush into my next job, but I was actually going to take the time now and to explore that creative, artistic side. And I've written a screenplay for a feature film,
Wow.
which I'm now trying to get off the ground. And again, it really isn't it's a film about humanizing the other, seeing ourselves in the other, looking for that mirror, and not about some big reconciliation, but just an acknowledgement that we are not so different from who we are supposed to fear. And just a little snippet. When I was at one of the hospitals in Hebron, I saw a name of the donor of the children's wing. And when I was here in Tel Aviv at also at the children's hospital, my daughter had a major asthma attack. I saw the name of the donor plaque, and it was the same name.
Mm.
And so from that spark, which was already 5 years ago, when I saw that donor plaque in Hebron, this is going to be the beginning of whatever it is that's going to come out of me, and that really is the beginning. And I did a whole lot of research about the name, and it's a fictional piece that I've written. But again, it really is just about, what our priorities, seeing, looking in the mirror and seeing the other, and acknowledging the other, and acknowledging their right to dignity and to security, and seeing that this is the only way we can move forward.
I love this. I love this. And just to conclude, I think for many of us, the latest trauma of October 7th, which shook all of us, I think it unleashed a lot of creativity, of things that we had repressed inside, and we had that realization that life is very short and very precious.
Yeah.
And there is no time just to be a lawyer or just to be an entrepreneur. There is also a need to express ourselves.
Yeah.
And
to heal.
To heal,
using art
to overcome the fear.
It's really true. You know, I've spent the last 3 months just kind of healing through writing, and it is. You're exactly right. I think, and you see it around the city, the paintings and the exhibitions, and we all need to heal. And art is actually a very good way, a very good medium.
Well, Ronit, thank you so much.
My
it's
pleasure.
Been such a pleasure. We look forward to hosting you after the premiere of the movie.
Let's hope.
It was really, really inspiring having you. And I'm actually thrilled to know that many other amazing women like you are going to join our next episode in our podcast. Next week we have Ronit Zimmer, which is an Israeli-American Druze advocate. So she will have to share a lot of us about this tiny community that most of the world doesn't even know, and is part of the amazing place that Israel is. So
thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. It was lovely to meet you both.
Thank you so much, and see you soon on Woman of Startup Nation.
Thank you. Ciao.
Looking for better days.
Bye.
Bye.